Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. We are here to talk more about holistic healing and expanded awareness that our next guest offers for families, professionals, and service of children with neurodiversity. So whether it's a learning difference, complex health needs, our next guest here joins us again, Christine LeBay, to talk more about the work she does as a pediatric NeuroMovement practitioner, conscious parenting coach, also an author of Our Superpowers, Celebrating Differently Abled Kids and Their Siblings, and the founder of Evolve Movement. So, Christine, welcome back. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do. And I know we're going to kind of, go back and get your whole story to get to know you personally. For new time listeners not aware of what you do, give us a little overview to start.
Sure. So I work with children that have neurodiversity, complex healthcare needs. It could be a variety of things. It could be either a diagnosis of autism or ADHD, or it could be children with conditions like cerebral palsy, Rett syndrome, Joubert syndrome. There's such a long list. And so I support these children with NeuroMovement, the Annette Banyal method of NeuroMovement, which is somatic work. Essentially, I'm creating opportunities for these children to create new neural pathways that they may not have created on their own. So really working with them to fill in the gaps where there are gaps in the brain. So it's really working with the brain. Otherwise, I also work with the parents as a conscious parenting coach. So working with them through what they're experiencing emotionally and coaching them and teaching them how to create that optimal learning environment for their child to truly step into their innate potential. In addition, I offer workshops and I offer, different virtual programs that are really great as well. And there's one that will be coming out soon that kind of brings together somatic work and some of that guidance to create an optimal learning environment.
Great. And how can we find you?
On my website, www.christine, Christine, Labbe, Labbe.com, and by email, christine@evolvemovement.ca.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for being here. And I know today you kind of want to give us a little more of your backstory. So walk us through it.
Yes. So, I think it's important for families to know that I see them and I get it. Although all our experiences are different and it really varies based on what our children are diagnosed with, I'm there with you and I really know what you're going through. And so I thought I'd share my own story. So my daughter, who is now 10 years old, has Rett syndrome. And when I first started this journey, I wasn't given a diagnosis until she was about 2.5. And during those early stages, she had developmental delay. And I remember being in this space of denial and just constantly wanting to be the fixer, the warrior parent, the person that was going to save her, right? And I know a lot of us parents do that. So we go and we find all the possible modalities out there to try and do whatever we can to help our child. And I feel like in those early stages, I was so focused on what wasn't there and on the fixing that I actually didn't see her. I didn't really see how magnificent and wonderful and beautiful she was. I wasn't really present to her being. I wasn't present to everything that was present, right? Her smile, her energy, how happy she was. I wasn't necessarily noticing those things because I was focused on what was wrong. And I think we all have this tendency to focus on what's lacking, what's wrong, what we don't have, and this is normal humanity. We all think of those things. Well, if I had this, I would be so much happier, right? And so when we're already in that kind of mindset, which I was, we're not really seeing our child through that clear lens. So that's that first piece, is that I wasn't really seeing her. And the other piece is I was suppressing my feelings. So I had learned for so long not to feel because feeling was painful. And I know a lot of people out there are going to, resonate with this, because I think a lot of people go through this where we just suppress because we don't want to feel. And, feeling is part of the healing. But I only learned that once I discovered the Annette Baniel method of neuromovement, which I then decided to study. So I went and trained for several years to become a professional, a practitioner, to be able to serve my daughter myself. Initially the goal was to be able to help my daughter. And then after I started working with the children, my heart just exploded and I just changed my career path. And what's important about this particular work and how it helped me as a parent in my own journey, and I think this is important, is talking about the parent journey, because we're often focused on the children, right? I think the important piece here was the somatic work. And for those who aren't familiar with somatic work, it's very much about body awareness. So you're becoming much more aware of yourself through the moving body in this particular case. So all of these subtleties that you may not have felt before, you will start to feel. And so as you start to expand your awareness and consciousness of self, even in your physical body, it actually opens you up to expand and feel so much more on an emotional level, start to connect to your intuition, connect to your inner voice. All these things that we may have suppressed in the past become much more within our consciousness.
Got it.
And so when I started doing this work, I really started to open up, and I found myself crying a lot because there was all kinds of emotions that were coming up to the surface that I had pushed down. It was almost like imagining a bottle that is full and then suddenly the cork pops off and everything just comes flooding out and you can't even control it, right? Because you're moving energy, you're moving blockages that are in your physical body, right? We talk about the physical self and the emotional self being intertwined, right? That you can't have one without the other. That's why we have holistic healing. And so for myself, I found the somatic work to be such a gentle way to enter the healing process, because if someone had asked me, you should really go speak to someone, at that time I would have said, what do you mean? I'm fine, right? Because I was the strong warrior
Yeah.
parent I wasn't feeling. And so I thought I was just fine. But really, I wasn't fine. But I wasn't aware that I wasn't fine. So, I think this is where the next piece came in, is when I started to really open up through the somatic work. I discovered the conscious parenting with Dr. Shefali, and I did this training, and then I started going deeper on an emotional level. So now I was open to receiving that information and to start doing that introspection. So some of that, and when I'm talking right now, this is some of the work that I do with the parents, because you asked me last time, can you walk us through?
Yeah.
Some of that is building that self-awareness, becoming more self-compassionate, building that self-understanding. So understanding what you're going through, why you have certain reactions, why certain things are triggering you. What is that trigger? Where does it come from? What are certain patterns that we keep repeating over and over and over again that actually keep us in suffering? So these are all things, it's all about bringing awareness to the self. And so this is kind of the work that occurs with the parents, but the somatic piece is such a beautiful combination with the emotional piece, because some parents aren't comfortable. They're not ready to start opening those doors, or they're just not at a stage where they can really see those things. So it's a nice way to start building that awareness. So then the conscious parenting came, and I started writing books, and I started doing conferences, and I started working with groups and professionals, etc. And I mentioned on our last call, and I think this is an important one, my daughter, and here's where I'll talk about her trajectory a little bit. So Rett syndrome is something that can progressively get worse over time. And so my daughter is non-ambulatory and nonverbal, so she's in a wheelchair, and she doesn't have intentional use of her hands. And she has seizure disorder and respiratory challenges that have led to multiple hospitalizations. And the first 2.5 years, she was delayed, but her health was good. And then at 2.5, there was a huge regression that took away any skills that she had accumulated, which were few at the time. And she started having a lot of health issues. And so we really had to navigate that, right? And what I found really important for myself as a parent is the more you become aware of yourself, and the more you understand how to find that peaceful sanctuary within yourself, to find that balance, to find that peaceful space, it's extremely important to have the resilience to move through the chaos because we navigate through a lot of chaos. You know, especially those parents that are listening today where your children do go to hospital a lot, are admitted
Yeah.
a lot. You know, it's difficult to be a parent and a professional and, you know, moving through the stresses that can occur when you have a child that has health difficulties. And so I found that deepening that connection to self, so moving into more mindfulness, you know, is
Hmm.
something that I really started to practice.
Yeah.
And I really started committing to and understanding that self-care. And I know a lot of parents are going to be like, oh, I'm tired of hearing about self-care.
I
And
know, right? No, but
right?
I get it.
But it's actually the only way that we can truly show up for our children is first by understanding ourselves and what's happening within ourselves. Because what happens within ourselves influences our children because they feel it. And you know, I learned this when my daughter, I had mentioned last time, she almost passed away last year. And you know, we were in the ambulance on our way from one point to another because we were actually at a cottage when this occurred. And we're driving to the hospital and we're about 45 minutes away from the hospital and she has a near-death experience. And we're in the ambulance and all I can see is her saturation start dropping. And then they took me out of the van and put me in front so that I wouldn't have to witness more. But I was sitting there and I closed my eyes and I know she left her body for that short period of time. And I don't know how long, I can't even tell you how long it was, but I closed my eyes and I was just connected to her and I could just feel peace. And I don't know where she went, but you know, we have this very close bond with our children, mothers
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
right? And I remember the doctor in the back, because there was a doctor in the ambulance,
Huh.
thankfully, and she said, "We have a pulse." And that in that moment, it's like I snapped back into my body, and then the shock of the event just had my whole body trembling. And it was such a
Goosebumps.
bizarre
Oh,
it was so bizarre, right? Because it's almost like I felt her go somewhere beautiful, and I felt how beautiful it was for that whatever amount of time it was, and then I was dropped right back into life, right? And it's during that specific period, it was for about a week's time. You know, I had PTSD. I was traumatized by the whole event. I was really struggling, and I really had to find my center. And my saving grace was really
hmm.
moments of stillness and silence, moments to just be with myself. And I had to take a step away. I had to walk away at times to just recenter. You know, that recentering is so key.
Yeah.
About 2 weeks later, we had a second event where, you know, I had just stepped out to do a few errands and I was called back into the hospital because her saturation had dropped again and they couldn't get it back up. And I remember walking into the room and there was so much stress and anxiety. It was just such a dark energy. And they were basically telling me she's dying. And I walked in and I laid down in the bed with her and I stared at her in her eyes and I told her, "Mama's peaceful. Feel my energy. You're safe." And I was really peaceful in that moment. I don't know how I did it, but it was just, I feel like all the work that I had done on myself and just learning to know what it feels like to be in that peaceful state
Yeah.
inside empowered me to be able to show up for her that day. And I think it's important for parents to understand this, is that she was the one struggling in that moment. I couldn't be struggling in that moment. I had to show up for her. I had to help her feel safe, and she needed to feel that, which means that I had to control what was occurring inside of me. And so in that moment, I laid down in the bed with her and I stared into her eyes and I stayed in that peaceful space. And it felt like there was this bubble around us. I couldn't hear anything around us. Everybody's
It's
running
like,
around. It was like just this crazy chaos going on around us. And I was staring at her and I just told her, I said, "If you choose to go, it's going to be beautiful. But if you choose to stay, you have the power to heal. You just
oh
need to
my
remember
gosh.
who you are." And I was just repeating to her how magnificent she is and that her eyes are just this mirror that, you know, reflect so much beauty and light. And I just went on and on and on. Anyway, it felt like 2 hours, but it was only 30 minutes and her saturation came back up.
Oh my goodness. I have such goosebumps. I'm freezing right now. I mean, really brings tears to my eyes. A beautiful, beautiful, amazing story. Wow, you were so strong and
I
strong
think
for her and your family, but my goodness.
I think it just speaks, I thank you for your kind words, but I really truly feel like her and I are a team. And
Hmm.
I think it really speaks to the importance of caring for the self.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't love myself enough
Hmm.
to figure out how I was going to navigate during that time, not knowing that that was coming. But I
Oh,
took that time. And so I want parents to know it's important to take that time. We don't know what the future holds. And, it certainly won't look like this for everyone. I certainly experienced, the worst possible case scenario, but it empowers me to be able to guide families
yeah.
to share and communicate the importance of caring for the inner self, of finding alignment within ourselves, of understanding our own anxiety, of letting go of control, of
Yeah.
being present. All these things really equip us to create that optimal learning
Hmm.
environment for our kids. So I'm going to stop talking now and I'll just kind of
Wow. Well, for those that are just tuning in, you missed an amazing story. I hope you've heard it. If not, how do we contact you? Could you just share those details since we are a little over halfway through? Thank you.
Of course, of course. They can contact me through my website, www.christinelabe.com, and they can email me, christine@evolvemovement.ca.
Wow. Thank you for this. And we still have 10 more minutes in your show. And I know we want to talk a little more about some of these lessons, obviously, that you've learned along the way with your own healing process, because this can't be hard. This can't be easy. I mean, but you've turned it around and you're taking the time to use your hurt, your pain, your to help others, because you're like, okay, I got this. And, not everybody gets it. It's not an easy thing to handle. I could only imagine, but you really empathize with those out there.
Yes, absolutely. It's hard. We're not going to pretend and say it's not hard. It's hard. And I think parents often feel unseen and they want people to acknowledge that, yes, it's hard, right? It's not an easy path, but it's also important to remember that we have power
Yeah.
and that we get to choose. We get to choose how we're going to navigate. And when we choose to stay in that space of not facing our pain and not digging deeper, then we're actually prolonging our own suffering and it impacts the whole family. So when we don't choose ourselves and choose to
Yeah.
take that time, we prolong the suffering. We forget that piece, that it's through the pain that we release the pain. And it's not as scary as you may think once you start to really
Yeah.
unpack and move through it, right? It's a feeling, it moves through you, and you learn how to allow those feelings to move through you.
Beautiful. And now the work that you're doing, if you could just share to our listeners specifically the types of things that you're doing.
Yes, well, I think, this whole story really speaks to, and just to let you guys know, Gabby is doing really well. She's been in states of seizure free. She's doing really well. We're managing those secretions extremely well now. She's not had as many admissions. All this to say, one of the big messages I try and share
Yeah.
is that correlation between the parents and their healing, self-understanding, and their expansion, the correlation between that and the child's development. That this is a big message that I'm trying to share either through, platforms like this or other, because it's important for hospitals to start to understand the importance of supporting these families as a whole,
Yeah.
right? And so this is part of the work, but I do support parents through workshop form and I do have virtual programs. Parents can come in and dip their toes. And I do have a program that is about to come out, which is actually a combination of the somatic work and the deeper understanding of self and how to start creating that optimal environment for the child to really thrive.
Wow. All right, this is great. Now let me ask you, so are you home full time with your daughter? Does she go to a special program or school, or is she with you full time for healthcare?
No, so I have nurses. I'm lucky to have nurses at home that care for her. She doesn't go to school because she does have a fragile immune system.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when the workday ends, it's like the nursing job starts to some
Of
extent, right?
course. No, absolutely. You could only have help for so long, but it's a full-time job.
It's really a full-time job, and we have to understand this. But I think it's also important to understand that we can do so much still. I'm still loving my
Yeah.
work and making a difference in life. And this whole journey has inspired me to be able to be of service. And that brings me so much joy. I'm happy, I'm joyful. Yes, there are moments that are hard. And I think it's important to note this. We're not always in this happy, joyful party state, right? I have moments where I'm anxious. I have moments where I'm stressed. That's normal where we're overwhelmed. But it's this idea of understanding when those things happen and how to move ourselves out of it,
Wow.
right? It's becoming empowered to be in control of what's happening internally, right?
No, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing this. What an experience. What a story. But would you change anything about it? Would you change anything?
I can't. I wouldn't have been able to show up for her in the way that I did if
Yeah.
anything different had occurred prior, right? It's part of that expansion. I feel like as human beings, we're here to experience contrast. We're here to move through difficult things so that we can grow and expand. That's the whole point, right? And so when we can start to see that as this is an opportunity rather than something that is happening to me,
Yeah.
it really starts to change because you can see how that particular event or situation has really empowered you to move into that next phase of life. And I think for all those parents out there, if you have a child, that has a neurodiversity or that has, healthcare needs, severe healthcare needs, whatever it may be, you have that child because you can move through this. You have this ability within you. It's a matter of choosing. You get to choose the path that you want to take, but it's there for you. It's available to you.
Thank you for sharing this. And in our last, we have just 5 minutes left. What else did you want to make sure we cover for today?
Um, that's a great question. You know what? Maybe I'll touch on that word self-care again really quickly
Yeah,
because it's so frustrating for parents to
it
hear
is.
it. But I think it's because it's understanding what self-care means, right? And it's really so much deeper than exercise and nutrition
Yeah,
and going to the spa and finding balance in
so
the
true.
sense of, making time to go to this place or that place. It's so much deeper than that. And sometimes it can simply be taking 5 minutes of stillness a few times a day. Maybe you set an alarm. Maybe when you transition from work to home, you sit in your car for 2 minutes and you just close your eyes and you feel into your energy. You feel into how you are in that moment so that you
Yeah.
can shift your energy before you go into the home. Right? It's this practice of tuning in and shifting. Tuning in, becoming aware, and shifting. So the more we're able to do that, the more it empowers us to understand what's happening and when things are happening. So when we are being triggered, we're much more able to pause before we react, right?
Yeah.
To pause before we panic so that we understand what's happening inside. So for all parents out there, if you're not committed or you're undecided about going down that deeper path, you can just start with those moments of stillness, those moments of pause, just being present to yourself. Just start feeling. And they can do a little body scan, from your head to your shoulders, or your shoulders up into your ears,
Hmm.
down into your chest. Does your chest feel tight? And just moving your attention down your physical self. You'll notice that if you're someone who's always stuck in your head and overthinking all the time, this will immediately calm your nervous system because you'll move from your mind to being more
Okay.
grounded, right? So anyway, a few pieces of advice for those parents out there.
Well, thank you so much. And if we want to reach out to you, would you mind sharing again all the contact possibilities? Thank you.
Of course, www.christinelabe.com, and they can email me at christine@evolvemovement.ca.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much for today and sharing your own personal experience and journey. And God bless you, your daughter, your family. And thank you for helping so many.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a
Have a
pleasure to
great
be here.
day. And to all of our listeners, please stay tuned. We'll be right back with more.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.